The HOA bill hit my ranch gate before I finished locking it, sliding under the steel latch in a white envelope stamped final notice. I tore it open beside the cattle guard and saw dues, late fees, and a threat to place penalties on land they did not own. My ranch sat almost a mile outside Cedar Ridge Estates, past 2 county ditches, 1 gravel easement, and a fence line I controlled. The notice claimed unpaid community obligations could affect surrounding access and services. Then I saw the parcel number printed beneath my address. It was not my parcel number. They had sent me a demand built on someone else's map. That was their first mistake. Dust moved across the road in thin brown sheets. The afternoon sun sat low over the pasture, turning the grass copper and sharp. My old mailbox creaked in the wind behind me. The cattle near the west fence barely looked up. They had more sense than whoever mailed that letter. I read the amount again. $3,800. Annual dues. Road maintenance. Landscape reserve. Security contribution. None of those things touched my ranch. Cedar Ridge had its own paved streets, its own stone entrance, its own little fountain where residents pretended the mountains belonged to them. I had a ranch gate, a gravel road, and 78 acres of dry grass, mesquite, and silence. My name is Nathan Walker. I bought the place 6 months earlier after 20 years of fixing old land deals, boundary disputes, and title problems for people who did not read the fine print until it started costing them money. This ranch was clean. I made sure of that before I signed. Deed, survey, access easement, county map. Every document said the same thing. Outside HOA jurisdiction. That was why I bought it. My phone buzzed before I even reached the porch. The caller ID showed Cedar Ridge Association. I let it ring twice, then answered. Linda Parker's voice came through smooth and bright, like she had already won. Mr. Walker, I assume you received our notice. I looked down at the paper in my hand. The wind snapped one corner against my knuckle. I received a bill. Then we expect payment within 10 business days. I walked up the porch steps slowly. The boards gave their usual dry groan under my boots. Show me where I agreed. Silence. Not long. Just enough to tell me she had expected anger, not a question. All properties benefiting from the Cedar Ridge Community Framework are subject to assessment, she said. That sounded rehearsed. Too rehearsed. I set the envelope on the porch rail. Send me the recorded covenant. That is not necessary at this stage. Then send the annexation record. Another pause. A longer one. Somewhere behind her, papers shuffled. You are making this more difficult than it needs to be. The sun dropped behind the ridge, and the shadow of my gate stretched across the gravel like a black line. I looked out toward Cedar Ridge in the distance. Their rooftops barely showed above the trees. Close enough to covet my land. Too far away to govern it. Linda lowered her voice. Refusal to comply may result in escalation. I almost laughed, but the sound never came out. Escalation was a strange word to use before showing proof. The letter smelled like fresh toner and cheap pressure. I folded it once and placed it beside my deed folder on the kitchen table. Outside, the wind pushed against the screen door. Inside, the house went quiet. This was no longer a billing mistake. Then the second envelope arrived. The second envelope was waiting on the porch when I stepped outside the next morning. Dew still clung to the fence posts. The air smelled like dry earth and wet cedar. A red stamp stretched across the front. Notice of noncompliance. They had moved from billing to accusation in less than 24 hours. I carried it to the kitchen table and opened it beside the first letter. The paper crackled under my fingers. Another fee had appeared. Another deadline. Another warning. Still no covenant. Still no annexation record. Still no proof. That detail kept getting louder. I poured coffee and read every line twice. The language was polished, formal, confident. Yet every paragraph seemed to dance around the same missing question. Why did they believe they had authority over my ranch? A pickup truck rolled past the front gate. Then another. Ranch traffic was usually predictable. This felt different. Around noon, my phone buzzed again. Cedar Ridge Association. I answered immediately. Nathan Walker. Have you reconsidered your position? Linda asked. Her voice sounded less friendly now. Have you found the document I requested? A brief silence followed. Our board considers your property part of the community benefit area. That is not what I asked. Papers shifted somewhere on her end. You are receiving benefits connected to neighboring infrastructure. I looked out the window toward my gravel road. I paid for that road. I maintained that road. The county easement reached the highway without touching HOA land. Show me the recorded document, I said. The board has already determined its position. Then showing proof should be easy. The call ended 30 seconds later. Not because I hung up, because she did. That told me more than anything she actually said. By late afternoon, I was driving toward the county records office. The sun burned white above the hills. Dust followed my truck for half a mile. The building sat beside the courthouse, quiet and almost empty. Inside, fluorescent lights hummed softly overhead. The smell of old paper filled the room. A clerk named Susan pointed me toward the parcel archives. I requested every recorded document tied to my ranch. Deed history, boundary surveys, easement records, annexation filings. She disappeared into the back room. When she returned, she carried a stack thick enough to fill a briefcase. That was exactly what I wanted. Facts made better company than opinions. I spent nearly 2 hours turning pages. Survey maps stretched across the table. Legal descriptions wound through section lines and township markers. Every document told the same story. The ranch remained outside Cedar Ridge. Outside their authority. Outside their obligations. Then I reached a county subdivision map dated 7 years earlier. My finger stopped on a narrow strip of land between the HOA boundary and my property line. It was not empty. It was separately owned. A legal buffer. A gap. A gap large enough to destroy every claim Linda had made. I leaned back in my chair and studied it again. The clerk noticed my expression. Find something? She asked. Maybe, I said. Maybe they forgot this existed. Then I saw a reference number that led somewhere else. The reference number led me to a separate archive room at the back of the county building. The heavy door clicked shut behind me. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. Rows of gray filing cabinets stretched across the room. The air smelled like dust, paper, and old cardboard. Susan walked me to a cabinet near the far wall and pulled open a drawer. Everything connected to that tract should be here, she said. Then she left me alone. I found the file within minutes. The folder was thinner than I expected. That alone caught my attention. Large developments usually left long trails. Amendments, surveys, boundary updates, corrections. This folder contained very little. I opened it carefully. The first pages match what I had already seen. Parcel maps, boundary descriptions, ownership transfers. Nothing unusual. Then I reached the annexation section. My hand stopped. A page was missing. Not torn out. Not damaged. Missing. The numbering jumped forward. One page simply did not exist. I checked again. Same result. I flipped backward. Then forward. The gap remained. A note in the corner referenced an attachment that should have followed. It never appeared. My eyes moved to the next page. The attachment was supposed to contain authorization signatures. Without those signatures, the annexation process could not be verified. I sat back slowly. The chair creaked beneath me. Outside the narrow window, the afternoon sun had begun to fade. Something important had disappeared from the record. A few minutes later, Susan returned carrying another box. Found an older copy request, she said. Different year. That changed everything. The second file contained duplicate records submitted during a previous title review. Most pages matched perfectly. One did not. I placed both copies side by side. The difference was impossible to ignore. The older request referenced a complete attachment package. The current archive did not. Someone reviewing the newer file would never know it existed. I photographed every page, every number, every notation. The camera shutter echoed softly through the room. Then another detail surfaced. The legal description tied to Cedar Ridge stopped before reaching the buffer parcel between my ranch and the subdivision. That buffer appeared again and again throughout the records. Different surveys, different years. Same result. The gap never disappeared. The HOA boundary never crossed it, which meant their claim never reached my land. The sun was nearly down when I carried copies to the front counter. Susan reviewed them quietly. Looks like you found your answer, she said. Maybe part of it, I replied. She nodded toward the missing attachment reference. That piece usually matters. Usually. Not always. But usually. I left the building with a folder under my arm and a growing list of questions. The courthouse parking lot glowed orange beneath the setting sun. A warm wind carried the smell of dry grass across the pavement. My truck door slammed shut. The sound echoed through the nearly empty lot. Before I started the engine, my phone lit up. Another email from Cedar Ridge had arrived. This time, the language was far more aggressive. They were getting nervous. That meant I was finally getting close. Then I noticed who had been copied on the message. The email glowed on my phone screen as I pulled out of the courthouse parking lot. The sender was Cedar Ridge Association. The tone had changed completely. Formal language was gone. The message spoke about enforcement, compliance, and possible collection measures. But that was not what caught my attention. A second recipient sat beneath Linda Parker's address. Martin Graves. I had never heard the name before. The sun was dropping behind the hills as I drove back toward the ranch. Orange lights stretched across the highway. Dust hung in the air behind passing trucks. I stopped twice at red lights and read the email again. Martin was copied on every threat, every demand, every deadline. Yet his name had never appeared in any letter mailed to me. That felt important. By the time I reached the ranch, darkness had settled over the pasture. The gate groaned as I opened it. Crickets filled the silence. A warm breeze carried the smell of dry grass across the property. I parked near the barn and walked toward the house with the folder under my arm. The porch light cast a yellow circle across the boards. Another envelope waited beside the front door. The third one in 3 days. I carried it inside without opening it. First came coffee, then paperwork. I spread every document across the kitchen table. Survey maps, county records, email printouts, the missing attachment reference, the separate buffer parcel. Everything remained exactly where it had been an hour earlier. Only now I had a new name. Martin Graves. I opened my laptop. 10 minutes later, I found him. He was not a lawyer. He was not a county official. He was a private consultant hired by several homeowner associations throughout the region. His business specialized in compliance management and expansion planning. Expansion planning. I stared at those two words. They lingered on the screen longer than they should have. A mini biography mentioned property integration projects. Another article referenced annexation reviews. Suddenly, the aggressive emails made more sense. This was not about collecting one fee. Something larger sat behind it. My phone rang before I could dig further. Linda again. I answered. Her voice sounded controlled, but only barely. You have ignored multiple notices. I looked at the stack of documents beside me. I have asked the same question multiple times. Silence. Then a slow breath. The board expects cooperation. The board can send the recorded authority. More silence. The refrigerator hummed quietly behind me. Outside, the wind rattled the screen door. You are creating unnecessary complications, she finally said. Complications usually start when paperwork disappears. She ended the call immediately. That reaction told me enough. I spent another hour reviewing county maps. The buffer parcel appeared every time. Different years, different surveys. Same result. Then I noticed something else. One HOA planning map showed the subdivision boundary drawn slightly differently than the official county version. The difference was small. Most people would never notice it. But I noticed. The line drifted closer to my ranch. Not enough to be legal, just enough to change perceptions. I compared the maps side by side beneath the kitchen light. One came from the county. One came from Cedar Ridge. They were telling two different stories. Then an unexpected message arrived from someone inside the neighborhood. The message arrived through a private neighborhood forum account created only an hour earlier. No name, no profile photo, just a short sentence. You are not the only one receiving those letters. I stared at the screen. The kitchen clock ticked softly above the stove. Wind brushed against the windows. Then a second message appeared. Check your email. An attachment followed. I downloaded it immediately. The file contained scanned notices identical to mine. Same formatting, same threats, different addresses. My eyes moved from one page to another. None of the properties belonged inside Cedar Ridge. One sat across the county road. Another bordered state grazing land. A third was nearly 2 miles away. The pattern was impossible to ignore. This was not about my ranch anymore. The sender disappeared before I could reply. The account went offline, but the documents remained. I printed every page. The printer hummed through the quiet house. Fresh paper stacked beside the county records, already covering half my table. The pile kept growing. By sunrise, I knew I needed another layer of proof. County maps showed boundaries. Missing records raised questions. Now I needed physical confirmation. I called a licensed survey company shortly after 7. 2 days later, 3 trucks rolled through my gate. The lead surveyor introduced himself as Ben Carter. Gray beard, sun-faded hat, 40 years of field work written across his face. He studied my documents while standing beside the ranch fence. Dust swirled around his boots. "Interesting situation," he said. "Let us see what the ground says." That was exactly why I hired him. Land rarely lied. People did. The survey crew spent the morning unloading equipment. Tripods, GPS receivers, marker rods, bright orange flags. The metallic clicks echoed across the pasture. The sun climbed higher. Heat shimmered above the grass. I followed from a distance while they worked. Every measurement traced lines recorded long before Cedar Ridge existed. Around noon, Ben called me over. He pointed toward a ridge near the eastern boundary. "See those markers?" I nodded. "Those are original reference points." He checked his tablet again, then checked it a second time. That caught my attention. Surveyors trusted measurements. They rarely repeated obvious results. "Something wrong?" I asked. Ben looked back toward the subdivision. "Not wrong. Just very clear." He turned the screen toward me. The map displayed my ranch in green. Cedar Ridge sat beyond the buffer parcel exactly as the county records showed. There was no overlap, no connection, no shared boundary, nothing. The gap remained. Ben smiled slightly. "You are not even close." The words felt heavier than they sounded. Hours later, the crew completed their work. The official survey would arrive in a few days, but the preliminary results already answered the central question. Cedar Ridge had no measurable path to my property. None. As the trucks prepared to leave, Ben handed me a copy of the field notes. One page contained a handwritten observation. My eyes stopped immediately. A previous survey request had been submitted years earlier by someone connected to Cedar Ridge. The request had been denied. I looked up. Ben was already climbing into his truck. Dust rose behind the tires as the convoy rolled away. I stood alone beside the fence line holding the note. Someone inside that HOA had already learned the truth years ago. Then I saw the name attached to the old request. The name on the old survey request was Martin Graves. I stood beside the fence line reading it twice while the last survey truck disappeared down the ranch road. Dust drifted through the evening light. The pasture had gone quiet again. Only the wind moved. Martin's name connected too many pieces at once. The copied emails. The expansion planning work. The missing attachment in the county archive. Now an old survey request that had already tested the same boundary question years earlier. Someone had checked the facts before. Someone had received an answer. And somehow, the demands kept coming. I carried the field notes back to the house and spread them across the kitchen table. The survey maps covered nearly every surface now. County records sat in neat stacks beside them. The room smelled like paper, coffee, and dry cedar drifting through the screen door. I opened my laptop and searched deeper. Several archived meeting summaries from Cedar Ridge mentioned future growth opportunities. Most were vague. Community enhancement, long-term planning, property integration. The language felt carefully chosen. Then I found something different. A reference to an annexation review project. No details, no attachments. Just a brief note showing the project had been closed years earlier. Closed. That word stayed with me. If the project had failed, why were they still acting as though it succeeded? My phone vibrated across the table. An unfamiliar number appeared. I answered. A man's voice came through, low and cautious. "You are Nathan Walker?" "Yes." A pause followed. "My name is Eric Lawson. I own land north of yours." I recognized the name immediately from one of the anonymous documents. "You received notices too?" I asked. Another pause, then a quiet laugh. "For almost 3 years." I leaned back in my chair. Outside, the last sunlight faded beyond the hills. "Did they ever show proof?" "No," his answer arrived instantly. Too instantly, like he had repeated it many times. We talked for nearly 40 minutes. Eric described the same pattern. Demands, fees, warnings, delays whenever documents were requested. He eventually stopped paying and hired his own attorney. The HOA backed away without explanation. That detail mattered. If they truly possessed authority, they would have produced it. Instead, they disappeared. Before ending the call, Eric mentioned something else. A hearing, several years earlier. A county review involving subdivision expansion proposals. The request never moved forward. "You should ask for the hearing records," he said. "That is where everything started." After the call ended, I drove back to the county office first thing the next morning. The building felt quieter than before. Susan recognized me immediately. She Smiled the moment I walked through the door. Back already? I need hearing records. Her expression changed slightly. Not concern. Recognition. She knew exactly what I meant. 20 minutes later, she returned carrying a thin file. Much thinner than I expected. I opened it at a wooden table near the window. The first pages contained meeting schedules, attendance lists, administrative notes. Then I reached the final section. A reference appeared to an annexation package submitted for review. Attached documents listed several required exhibits. I counted them carefully. One exhibit number was missing. The same exhibit referenced in the archive gap. The same attachment that should have contained the critical authorization page. Then I noticed who signed the submission cover sheet. The signature belonged to Martin Graves. I stared at the cover sheet while morning light spilled across the county office table. The same name kept appearing. Consultant. Expansion planner. Survey applicant. Submission coordinator. Every road seemed to lead back to him. I copied the entire file before leaving. The printer hummed steadily. Paper slid into the tray one page at a time. Outside, the sky was clear and bright. The courthouse steps radiated heat. By the time I reached my truck, my phone contained photographs of every document I had collected so far. The file on my ranch was growing larger by the day. So was the pattern. Back at home, I spread the new records across the kitchen table. The hearing file sat beside the survey results. The county maps sat beside the anonymous notices. One question connected them all. If the expansion effort had failed years ago, why were people still receiving demands? Before I could think further, another email arrived. This one came from Eric Lawson. Attached were 3 additional notices from neighboring landowners. Different names, different addresses, same language, same threats, same references to community obligations. I opened each one carefully. The dates stretched back several years. This had been happening much longer than I realized. A chill moved through the room despite the afternoon heat. The ranch was quiet. Only the ceiling fan turned above me. Then my phone rang again. Another landowner. Then another. By sunset, I had spoken with 5 people. None lived inside Cedar Ridge. All had received demands. All had asked for proof. None had received it. One retired couple told me they paid for nearly 2 years because they feared legal trouble. Another owner ignored the notices until they suddenly stopped. Every story sounded slightly different, yet the structure never changed. Demand, pressure, delay, silence. The pattern was becoming impossible to dismiss. I created a spreadsheet that evening. Names, addresses, dates, notice amounts, responses, missing documents. The list filled faster than expected. What began as a dispute over my ranch was turning into something larger. The numbers alone told a story. Several properties sat completely outside HOA boundaries. Others were separated by public roads, utility corridors, or independent parcels. None appeared connected through recorded authority, yet they all received the same treatment. Around 9 o'clock, I stepped onto the porch with a cup of coffee. The air smelled like dry grass and mesquite. Coyotes called somewhere beyond the eastern ridge. The stars were beginning to appear overhead. My phone buzzed once more. A new message arrived from the anonymous account that contacted me days earlier. Only 2 sentences appeared. People are talking now. The board knows. Then the account vanished again. I read the message twice. The board knows. That changed the atmosphere immediately. Until now, I had been gathering records quietly. Now the pressure was shifting. They were becoming aware that landowners were comparing notes. The next morning proved it. A certified letter arrived before breakfast. The envelope was thicker than usual, more formal, more urgent. I opened it at the kitchen table while sunlight crossed the floorboards. Inside was a demand for immediate compliance and a notice of potential escalation. Still no proof. Still no recorded authority. Still no answer to the question I asked from the beginning. But one paragraph caught my attention. It referenced an upcoming county hearing. That was the first time they mentioned it. The county hearing notice sat in the center of my kitchen table while morning sunlight stretched across the survey maps. I read the paragraph 3 times. Cedar Ridge intended to present information related to ongoing property assessment authority. That wording alone raised questions. If they already possessed authority, why present it now? Why bring it to a hearing? The room felt unusually quiet. Even the ceiling fan seemed slower. I gathered every document I had collected over the previous weeks. County maps, survey reports, hearing records, email chains, Notices from neighboring landowners. The stack nearly filled a storage box. What started with one demand letter had become an entire timeline. 2 days later, I drove to the county administration building. The parking lot was fuller than expected. Trucks lined the curb. Sedans filled nearly every space. As I walked toward the entrance, I recognized Eric Lawson standing near the front steps. He was taller than I imagined. Gray hair, weathered face, calm expression. He nodded the moment he saw me. "Looks like half the county showed up," he said. He was not far off. Inside, the hearing room buzzed with quiet conversations. Papers shuffled. Chairs scraped against the floor. People I had never met sat holding copies of notices similar to mine. Some glanced toward Cedar Ridge representatives gathered near the front row. Others simply watched. The atmosphere felt tense without anyone raising their voice. I found a seat near the center aisle. The hearing began shortly afterward. Administrative updates came first. Routine items, budget approvals, infrastructure discussions. Then Cedar Ridge appeared on the agenda. Linda Parker stepped forward with Martin Graves seated beside her. For the first time, I saw them together in the same room. Linda spoke confidently. Martin remained silent. A projection screen displayed maps behind them, boundary diagrams, planning exhibits, expansion concepts. The presentation moved quickly, too quickly. My eyes followed each image carefully. Then one slide appeared that stopped me cold. It showed a boundary configuration almost identical to the altered planning map I discovered earlier. Not the county version, the HOA version. The line drifted closer to surrounding properties, including mine. A few people exchanged looks. Others frowned. Linda continued speaking as though nothing was unusual. Then the county moderator opened the floor for questions. The room went still. I stood. Every chair seemed louder than normal as I stepped into the aisle. The survey report felt heavy in my hands. My pulse remained steady. Facts make good company. I asked one question. Can you identify the recorded document granting authority beyond the official county boundary? Silence followed immediately. Not a dramatic silence. A real one. Papers stopped moving. Conversations ended. Linda glanced toward Martin. Martin looked down at his notes. The moderator repeated the question. No answer came. Instead, Martin requested clarification. I handed copies of the survey findings to the county staff. Then copies of the hearing records. Then copies showing the missing exhibit reference. Several officials began reviewing them immediately. The atmosphere changed. Not suddenly. Gradually. Like air leaving a tire. Confidence faded from the front row. Questions multiplied. More landowners stood up. More notices appeared. More dates. More addresses. The pattern that existed quietly for years was now sitting in plain view. Then one county official asked for a document nobody seemed prepared to produce. The document the county official requested was the same one that had haunted every file I touched. The missing exhibit. The authorization attachment. The page that should have connected claims to actual authority. The hearing room fell silent as everyone waited. Papers rustled softly. Air conditioning hummed overhead. Martin Graves opened a binder and flipped through several sections. Linda Parker searched her folder. Neither found what the official requested. Seconds stretched longer than they should have. Then the official asked again, "Do you have the recorded exhibit?" Martin cleared his throat. Linda looked toward him. No answer came. Around the room, people exchanged glances. The confidence that filled the front row earlier had vanished. The county staff continued reviewing the copies I provided. Survey reports moved from hand to hand. Boundary maps sat beside hearing records. The stack of notices from neighboring landowners kept growing. One official compared the county map to the planning map shown during the presentation. Another reviewed the annexation references. Then the moderator spoke. His voice remained calm. Without supporting documentation, the claimed authority cannot be verified. The words landed heavily. Not dramatic, just final. Linda attempted to explain. Martin attempted to clarify. Neither produced the document. Neither explained the missing exhibit. Neither addressed the buffer parcel that separated my ranch from Cedar Ridge. Facts do not care who speaks louder. The room understood that now. More questions followed. Other landowners stood. More notices appeared. More dates. More examples. Every new document pointed in the same direction. The pattern became impossible to ignore. Demand letters had traveled far beyond verified boundaries. Assumptions had been treated like authority. Planning maps had been treated like recorded facts. Then Susan entered the hearing room, carrying a folder I recognized immediately. The older archive request. The duplicate record set. She handed it directly to county staff. Several minutes passed while they reviewed it. I watched quietly from my seat. The fluorescent lights reflected across the polished table surface. Outside the windows, afternoon sunlight brightened the courthouse lawn. Inside, years of unanswered questions were finally sitting in one place. Then the moderator read a short statement into the record. The annexation review had never been completed. The required authorization exhibit was absent from every verified county copy. No recorded document extended Cedar Ridge authority across the buffer parcel. No evidence presented during the hearing changed that conclusion. A few people exhaled at once. Others nodded quietly. Eric Lawson smiled for the first time all day. I looked down at the survey report resting in my lap. The answer had been there from the beginning. Boundaries matter. Records matter. Proof matters. The hearing ended less than 30 minutes later. Outside, people gathered in small groups beneath the afternoon sun. Conversations filled the courthouse steps. Landowners exchanged phone numbers. Copies of documents changed hands. For the first time since the first letter arrived at my gate, nobody seemed confused. The story finally matched the facts. I drove back to the ranch with the windows down. Warm air rolled across the pasture when I opened the gate. The same gravel road stretched toward the house. The same fence lines stood where they always had. Nothing about the land changed. Only the truth became impossible to ignore. Justice was never loud. It was patient,